Any questions regarding those three areas can always be directed generally to our central office, and we can assist you. Erica Thompson, you met earlier today at the UST Cares session. She is our other associate director, and she handles the people side. She told you a little bit today about our staffing and that we have full-time area directors on our campus that are master's degree holders. We have graduate student hall directors, which are part-time. They're doing classes, and then they're working for us and getting that experience in student affairs. And then our resident advisors, who are our first line for all of our students. And whether that be to be a resource for your student and direct them in the correct way when they need to get assistance on campus in some way, or just to be there to listen. And that is something we really strive to promote to our RAs, that they are there first and foremost to be a listener to all of their residents. So how do we communicate, and what are some of those expectations? We directly communicate with your students via email. That is the official form of communication for the university, and you've probably heard this multiple times as we've gone through the day, that the residents, or that email, and from our email, residencelife, or reslife@stthomas.edu, is the way we will always communicate about housing. This is how they also get communicated about their billing statement. So it is very important that your student is checking their St. Thomas email, or at a minimum, forwarding that email on to another source that they're checking more regularly. We find more and more, we do try to make phone calls, cell phones, whatever it may be. We're finding our students really don't like to answer their cell phones, which is very ironic considering that's what their original purpose was for. We do not text our students, at least in our office. We are not going to send them a text. So we ask that they really pay attention to the email, because if we have any questions or concerns, we will share that way. We also try to contact them via phone as well. Our website will generally update with important information that is accessible to everyone as we talk about housing selection for next year, break periods, whatever that may be. We have some information out there right now with our housing options and different floor plans. That is continuing to be updated here through the fall semester, and hopefully it will be at 100% complete at that point. And Facebook is really our unofficial form of communications. And if you follow us on Facebook, you'll see that we put information out there about break periods and about that important information, but we try to share some fun things as well. And that might be a really cool picture of campus that was taken that morning, or it might be an article like we have right now that says why it is I live in a residence hall and not a dorm, and what's the difference. So something for you and something for your students to really engage in and to interact with us on a regular basis. And we know they are still using Facebook, so it is something that they can continue to use. Every month, the Dean of Students will send out the St. Thomas Parent, which is a parent newsletter, and that's a monthly update on campus events, and that's division-wide and campus-wide for all of you. So not only will it have housing information in it, generally we get a little blurb every month, but it might have important information of speakers coming to campus that are open to the public that may interest you. Or it might have information about things to be aware of this time of year as your students are progressing through whatever academically, getting into the winter, it's a little bit colder, how do they stay active? Could be a variety of different topics. And last, about phone calls. We do encourage that you encourage your students to come to us and interact with us directly if they have a question or a concern. Now, we know that that can be difficult for some of our students, but we ask that they at least make an effort, whether going to their RA, going to their hall director, coming to our office and asking for assistance first before you being the #1 contact with us. If you call our office, which I encourage you to do, I will ask you, however, does your student know you're calling? And what have they done to address that on their own? I oftentimes get a phone call from a parent or guardian that will say, you know, my student is really struggling with a roommate issue and I really need them just to be moved, but you can't tell them I'm calling you. Doesn't work. Our students are not at a point where they're going to believe me when I say that I was sitting at home last night watching Wheel of Fortune, and all of a sudden I had a thought you're having a roommate conflict, so I figured I'd give you a call this morning. They're not going to buy it. So what I ask you to do is just make sure they know you're calling and that we know that they've made some progress or some effort to try to resolve the situation on their own. Again, please call us if they have and you feel that it's not been adequately resolved, because then we can continue to work with you as a team to resolve the situation. So some of the things I hear from parents and guests, as I've done this for 8 years now, is, will we see our students' room today? You will have an opportunity to go on a tour on the residence hall in which your student lives at the conclusion of the session today. You will see a sample room in the building. We have a couple very large conferences in our buildings here right now today, so we'd ask very much that you do not wander from your group. Only look at the showrooms that you are being shown. As tempting as it might be to go up and look at your student's room, please, for the safety and security of our guests that are here, we ask that you do not leave your group. And last, we're going to ask that you please excuse our mess. Conferences create a mess of their own as they're here, but we are in the constant process of doing laundry for our conferences, and we don't have our sets completely ready for your students to arrive. We are still a month away. What I will tell you is that those concerns you might have about cleanliness as you're walking through today, those will be resolved by the time you arrive on campus in September. I often get asked, do we need renter's insurance? One of the things that was sent home to your student in their assignment packet was whether was a renter's insurance policy option that you can take a look at. It is a company we have used and sponsored through the university for many years. What I need you to understand is this, is check with your homeowners or your renter's insurance currently and see what is covered for your student already under that existing policy. But also being aware of what might be those things that you may want to think about when you're thinking about loss in a particular residence hall. And the example I'll give you is this. This past spring, May, we were about 3 weeks away from finals. Student was hanging some clothing up on a hanger on one of our sprinkler heads in her room. She went to pull off the hanger and proceeded to trip the water function in the sprinkler head, and a large amount of water came into her room very, very quickly, and 13 rooms around her. So 14 rooms affected, and we were very lucky that we actually had someone on campus who got the water turned off in a very quick manner, which if we would have waited for St. Paul Fire to get here, it would have been a lot worse. That student had a complete loss of every item in her room. She did not have renter's insurance. The university does not cover personal loss for a student. So something to be aware of. And you think about the amount of items that your students are bringing when you look at electronics, cell phones, laptops, any type of tablet, gaming systems, televisions. And then you think about textbooks. Some of you have not seen the textbook costs yet. That might be a little bit of a surprise for you here in a couple weeks. But it will not be cheap if you need to replace textbooks. So just take a look at it, make sure that you are prepared. Because sometimes it may not even be your student's fault, but it could be someone down the hall. Last, we get asked a lot, can we remove furniture that we do not want from the room? Unfortunately, our housing agreement says that all items must remain in the room, and this means that it can help you and help your students plan accordingly on what to bring, because some of our rooms are not very big, and so you want to prepare for that. And remember, a lot of times there are more than one person living in that room, so therefore you need to be a little bit more selective. Students, the ones of you who are here, what I tend to tell you is that put into a large pile all those items you want to bring to campus, and then cut that in half, because a lot of that stuff you will not touch in your first semester here at college. So, as we're waiting for the rest of the groups to come in, we'll start talking about assignments. On July 1st, we sent postal letters home, postmarked on July 1st, to most of our students, and electronic email went out to students, both a personal and UST email that they had on file with us. That went out at about 5:15. We know this because at about 5:16, Facebook spiked in searches for roommates on name. Most students are generally relatively happy with their roommates, and I know that there are exceptions to that. And I apologize, as much as we try to have a flawless system in matching roommates, I do not know of one yet that is 100% perfect. So what you need to understand, why did we do what we did? Our housing system uses that deposit date as the absolute first priority for assigning students into rooms. It looks at building preferences. It looks as if you said you wanted a special interest area or a living learning community. And it looked at those housing questions that we asked. But it looked at that date. An early date in our system, the very first deposit date this year was October 10th of 2014. So for people who stop by at the table or talk to me and say, well, we deposited really early, it was April 1st, the national deadline wasn't until May 1st, well, unfortunately in our system, April 1st is very, very late. We do not guarantee housing at the University of St. Thomas, but we still house about 95% of the freshman class. So what that means is we do our best with what we can. 93% of our students get their first or second choice in housing. 93.5% for women, 96% for men. That's pretty good for a campus that does not require it, nor that we actually still house a large percentage of what that is. Some other information that came in that packet that's important. There was a student information flyer that talked about what to bring and what not to bring and what we provide in the rooms, so make sure you take a look at that. Students, share that with your parents and guardians so that they have a list that they can be working from. There was a bedloft.com flyer for microfridge rentals. You are allowed to either rent and bring in that microfridge unit, or you can bring in a mini fridge and a microwave. On that same sheet about the student information, it did talk about what are the restrictions on those two items, so make sure you take a look at that. And lastly, about bed sheets. You can order bed sheets through the company that the information was provided. You are not required to. The reason why you might want to do that is that some of that money comes back to St. Thomas in the form of programming in our residence halls and money that goes to our RAs to be able to provide programming, food, and other opportunities for all of our students who live in the residence halls. Hopefully, students, you are more happy than you are upset about your class schedule. For those of you who got 8 a.m. classes, I apologize, but I suffered through that for about 3 years of college as well. So it happens. So that being said, now let's talk a little bit about roommate conflicts. One thing I mentioned earlier is that at about 5:16, a lot of our students on July 1st, a lot of our students went out after they received the email about how to find their roommate and opened a new tab and went to Facebook and typed in that student's name, and either were really, really happy or somewhat disappointed or just couldn't figure it out, one way or the other. Now, we know that we're not going to be 100% on putting the best roommates together. And as much as we try, some roommates just don't get along, and that happens. So part of how we manage through this process is that during opening weekend, you will sit with your roommate and you will set up a roommate agreement. And that will be with your RA's help, your resident advisor's help on the floor. And you'll set those guidelines about living and not living together and what it means. And hey, if I have food in the fridge, is it okay for you to eat it? Or if I have food in the fridge, you better not touch it because it's mine. I paid for it. Get your own food. Okay? Now, it won't be quite that mean, but we'll negotiate those things out. But the other part will be to where are we going to handle disagreements in the room. And one of the things that will always be in there on our end is that you always must communicate face-to-face, which is part of why the email that told you don't just go out to Facebook and send a Facebook friend request and a message and all that, or text message your roommate, but to actually pick up the phone and call each other, even if you know they're not going to answer, but call and set up that time to talk. Because when you get here, the expectation is if you have a disagreement, you will talk face-to-face. There's no sitting on opposite sides of the room and texting each other back and forth about how disappointed you are and what happened. There's also no sending nasty Facebook messages back and forth to each other or posting on Facebook and Twitter how much you hate your roommate. No, 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 we will not accept that. And we will find it, so please don't do that. We ask that you use a mediator. Use the resident advisor. Use your hall or area director. If you can't come to an agreement on how to resolve a conflict on your own and using the agreement that you've already set up. Generally, moving is the last option. And it's not because I want less work to do in my office, but it generally is because there's very little space for us to move students to on campus. What I can tell you right now is we are still very, very tight. We still have students living in what we call expanded housing, which is converted lounge spaces in Dowling and Brady Halls. So there's very little movement that we can negotiate at this time. There's a couple other things to remember. It may not be in your building of your first or second or third choice that has an opening. And there's no guarantee that the roommate you are going to live with is any better than the roommate you are leaving. And so just to keep that in mind, so before you say, the only way I can resolve this is to move, just understand that there are other pieces that go along with that that may not work in your favor either. So what does it mean to live on campus? As many of you know, our mission statement references the common good. And from the common good, it talks about with freedom comes responsibility. And what that means is you are responsible for your own actions and behaviors, whether that be with regards to noise. You want to blast your music at 2 a.m. at 100 decibels in your building. That is not going to fly with anybody in that building. Put on your headphones, relax, enjoy your music to yourself. We also have visitation hours, which means that on midnight, Sunday through Thursday night, and on 2 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights, all guests of the opposite sex must be out of our buildings. We are a Catholic institution, so we will enforce visitation. So just be aware that these are things that people have gotten in trouble for. It is very easy to tell when you have a male in a woman's room and a woman in a male's room. Most times your voices are very, very different. Okay? With regards to alcohol, and I know that you've probably heard about alcohol more today than you'd like to hear about. The only thing I'll say is this, is that on a second alcohol violation here at the University of St. Thomas, generally your parents or guardians are notified. So students, if your parents or guardians do not know that you drink, keep that in mind. And even if they do know you drink, understand that really that's that second step before we start talking about pretty serious consequences for your actions and behaviors. We also talk about being responsible for yourself and your items. And the biggest one on this is making sure that you are locking your doors when you are leaving, not losing your keys. And if you do lose your keys, to report them lost right away so you're not leaving your door open as you're going to and from class. Biggest part of this is that public safety will tell you most thefts that happen in our residence halls, even though they are pretty rare, come from unlocked rooms. Room door was left open, cell phone was sitting right on the desk right inside the room, door open, grabbed, 6 seconds, they're gone. No one saw it. Okay? Also, don't be the person to not have your key on you ever, because the staff is not going to want to do a lockout for you all the time, and you also don't want to be that student on the first week of class who you get up, you go shower, getting ready for your first class of the day, and your roommate gets up, decides not to shower and goes straight to class, and locks you out of the room in your towel. At that time of morning, the policy to get a key is to come to the Residence Life office, which is in between Brady and Dowling Halls, and get a spare. That can be pretty embarrassing in a towel. So please don't be that person for your own sake. But then also just make sure you have your key on you at all times. If you need, you get to keep these wonderful purple lanyards today. Use that for your key if nothing else. We do have card swipe access into all of our residence halls, and we ask that you watch tailgating. So if you don't know that person who walks in behind you, to make sure that you ask them who they are, where they're going, and should they really be there. For parents and guests and guardians, what I would say is, please don't have that expectation that anyone is going to let you into the building that is not your student. And that if you come to our office, we will always escort you if your student is not answering their phone and you were expecting them to meet you at 8 a.m. somewhere. Okay? Last, be safe when you're around campus. Use public safety to get to and from places, particularly at night or in times when you're alone and you don't feel safe. They will answer the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and say, we will get you from point A to point B, anywhere within 6 blocks of campus. So let's say you stopped at Devani's for a little bit, and you had a pizza, and you want to come home, and you're by yourself. It's 9:30 at night, it's dark, you're alone. Call public safety. They'll get you to wherever you need to be. I can't emphasize this enough. You can sit here and look at how beautiful this campus is over the lower quad and forget that you live in between two very large cities in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And this is an urban institution, so please be aware of that. There are 3 meal plans available to our first-year students, and very quickly about them. The block talks about how many meals are on that, and those meals are in our cafeteria-type spaces, which are all-you-can-eat spaces. So it says the student dining room, but that actually should be called the View now, downstairs. The Bins, which is on South Campus, and Food for Thought does a meal exchange for dinner. One thing to note, these meals do not carry over at the end of the semester, and so that means that most of our students start on that Block 150 meal plan because it gives the most amount of flex dollars, and you can always increase during the semester, but you can only decrease in the first 2 weeks of the semester. 75 to 80% of our students are on that Block 150 meal plan, first-year students, so something to be aware of. If you want to change your plan, you may do that online through the student housing system in Murphy. We ask that you just be aware of that. We say start low because you can always increase. So that leads us to move in. And again, just a little over a month away on Saturday, September 5th. Most of you will arrive on campus that day, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to go. You will be receiving in the mail either late next week or early the week following information about that process, which will include the time you are to arrive, how the process will work, and what you will do. You get 1 parking card per student moving in. That's generally 1 vehicle at a time, and we do a drop-and-go system. So you'll drive in, you'll get your packet that will have your key and all your information in it. You'll go to a spot. We'll have our moving crew, Team Sullivan's moving crew will be there. They'll help unload and move the items to the room. The driver of the vehicle will not leave the vehicle, and as soon as it is unloaded, we'll leave and go park at our Anderson parking facility and then walk back to help out in the room. So understand, it is not a parking system. It is a drop-and-go system. U-Hauls and trailers are discouraged. We would love to say that they are not allowed, but what I can tell you is that if you bring one of those in, you will not be able to get into our drop and unload areas. You'll be out on Selby Avenue here on the North Campus and near Summit Avenue here on the South Campus, and so you'll have further to travel and probably less help from our crew to do that. Another thing to keep in mind, particularly about box trucks like U-Hauls, if you look at most U-Hauls nowadays, many of them are much, much bigger than most of our residence hall rooms. So if you are bringing that much stuff, there's probably a problem because you're not all going to fit plus all of your stuff. Okay? There are a lot of services on campus that day. Make sure you get out of your room at some point and go see what's going on across campus. It will be a very, very busy place that day. For those students who might be arriving for early arrivals, your packet will have different information about when you'll be arriving for your event, whether that be the Business Innovation Program, Living Learning Communities, athletes for varsity sports. You will see that information. It will be sent to you separately as well, and you will have a different set of directions. So just be aware of that. We generally don't accept any type of general requests because in order to us be best prepared for all of our students to arrive on campus, we really want to stay within the timelines and the guidelines that we have. One day, we can do it. The whole place. Now, if you want to bring more items in on another day, you're more than welcome to do that. But our big move-in day, we will move in approximately 1,300 first-year students on Saturday the 5th. We've done it many times. So, can I wait list for a room change? This is a change from when this first slide got published a couple weeks ago. You all received an email to your St. Thomas email about a week ago now. Make sure that if you are interested in changing buildings, changing rooms, that you go fill out that information. If you have any questions about that, you can contact our office at Residence Life, and we can assist you with that. But what I will say is that we are still very tight on housing. I will not guarantee we will move anybody prior to school beginning, but it is an opportunity in case we have that option. How does housing for next year work? If you look on the back of your yellow canary sheets that you were given, you'll see a timeline of housing both for this year and preparing for next year. So break periods and whether or not you need to sign up to stay over a certain break period is on there. There's information about that. Generally the end of November is when we will start our housing application process for next year. And what that entails is, as a returner student, there is no deposit. If you are already here, you are able to apply free of charge to live with us. We'll go through some information sessions. We do tours of a lot of our spaces as we get into February. Toward the end of February and early March, we have our housing selection. This is a self-selection process. So unlike this year when we sent you where you were living and who you were living with, you will be able to go out and actually select the exact room you want to live in based on what's available. Just like signing up for classes. So be aware that it is a self-selection process. Applying alone is not enough to get housing for next year. You then generally have until April 15th to cancel your housing with no charge or penalty. We usually finish around March 15th, so that gives you about a month if you are considering off-campus options. If you are looking off-campus, this is our plug for off-campus student services, which is in the second floor of this building. They do a lot of great renters education. They have a great booklet on what to be watching for. Particularly around St. Paul, there are some very specific ordinances and laws, so make sure that you are aware of those before you sign a lease somewhere. We also ask that you have realistic expectations about housing types, and this is just, students, I really want you to listen to this because 6 months from now you're going to tell me you never heard me say this before. And that is 1/3 of our sophomores live in apartments, 1/3 of our sophomores live in suites, and 1/3 of our sophomores live back in our traditional halls, like where you are all living right now. Okay? We can't accommodate all of our students in apartments, so I just want you to be aware of that. And lastly, how does laundry work? Included in your room costs, you get 12 laundry swipes every 2 weeks. And what that means is that you go down, you'll swipe in the laundry system, you'll type in the washer or the dryer number, it will activate it. You then put your stuff in there, and you're ready to go. That is included in your room cost. No quarters are needed. Don't bring them. For 99.9% of our students, those 6 washes, 6 dries every 2 weeks is more than adequate. If you're that 0.1% who does need a little bit more, come talk to our office. We can help you out with that. What I would say is please do your laundry. Mostly because your parents and guardians don't want to have to do it for you when you bring it home. And if you don't do it, and men, I'm going to pick on you for a minute, those women in Dowling are not going to come visit you if your room smells like that all the time, okay? So just keep that in mind. I have time for a couple questions at this point, if anyone has any. Yes? Yep, great question. So the question was, how long does the move-in day go till? We will start at 7 a.m. We will generally be done by 4 p.m. It's a long day. So